Hey everybody, this is Troy over at Uncomfortable Truths. Thanks for checking me out. So today we're talking a little bit about Krystal Ball and Kyle Kulinski because their preferred candidate, Marianne Williamson, just dropped out of the presidential race on the Democratic side. And I do think that this is pretty interesting. So basically on the left, there has been somewhat of a debate from people like Krystal and Kyle saying that the only way that we're going to see positive change in our political system from their perspective is that we need to actually get into the Democratic Party, take control of it, and then pull things in the policy direction that we want to see. And then other people on the left, such as Jimmy Dore, are saying, look, the Democratic Party is completely corrupt. There's nothing that can be done to actually save it. So what we need to do is just start our own party and go from there and just cut all ties with the Democratic Party. Now, I'll point out that since 2016, it does appear that people have been attempting to change the Democratic Party, and it has continued to kind of go downhill from a left-wing perspective in particular. So you started out with Bernie Sanders nearly winning the presidency, the Democratic primary, and then it moved on to him doing a little bit worse in 2020. And then in 2024, the outsider candidate, Marianne Williamson, just got about 2% of the vote and lost to a guy that honestly doesn't seem to know where he's at and shouldn't be allowed to drive, let alone run the country. So I would argue that from their own perspective, that kind of changing the Democratic Party and making it a less corrupt party that is going to listen to the people is an absolute joke. So let's give Krystal just a moment to kind of explain what her thoughts are now that Marianne Williamson has been, beaten out of the Democratic primary. And I would even argue that the Democratic nomination committee, the Democratic primary process, was extremely unfair to Marianne Williamson. So while I don't like Marianne Williamson and I don't agree with her policies, I do think she was treated extremely unfairly. So let's go ahead and listen to how Krystal feels now that Marianne Williamson did attempt to run and has failed to win her election.
I think she has exposed what an anti-democratic shambles the Democratic Party is. I mean, it's just from the jump collaborating with their media organs, making sure she didn't get a good fair hearing, that people had no idea she was even running, that there were states where they just decided we're just not even going to have a primary, we're just going to anoint Joe Biden.
All right, everybody. So Krystal is now singing a slightly different tune, and this is what people like Jimmy Dore have been telling you. They're saying, yes, well, the reason why Bernie might have been able to be successful in 2016 was because we didn't see him coming. But now the Democrats will just completely ignore you. And if it looks like your candidate's winning, then we'll have all the other candidates coalesce against the establishment candidate. So time has demonstrated that there is no saving the Democratic Party from a populist perspective. There's nothing that can be done that's going to save it. They have super delegates. They will completely rearrange the schedule for voting. They will not have primaries. So Jimmy Dore is 100% correct in saying that, yeah, this is absolutely a graveyard for progressives. Now, I honestly think that that's great. So keep running in the Democratic Party because I don't agree with many progressive policies. However, there are a lot of populists on the left that actually do have stances that I want to see go into effect. For example, if you're on the left and you're anti-war, well, I mean, come on over. I'm happy to work with you on ending wars because I don't want to see people lose their lives for no reason. And so people like Jimmy Dore that have been going out and saying like, yeah, we'll work on the right where we agree with the right, and then we will have our disagreements where we disagree with them. But there's no reason to completely alienate somebody that's willing to work with you on something that both sides think is going to be beneficial. So I don't want to see corruption. So I want to see a very fair election process. I think it's completely reasonable that we actually have, debates. I think that Donald Trump, as much as I may support him, I think he definitely should have been in the Republican debates. And I think that our country's a little bit worse off for him not participating. I think Joe Biden should have been forced to do primary debates because if Joe Biden had actually had to go out and debate Dean Phillips or Marianne Williamson, I think the country would see even more than they're already seeing how poorly Joe Biden is doing mentally. And I think that that's a benefit for a country that actually has to go out and cast their ballots to decide who is going to be, the next president of the United States. So I'm very big on debates. I think it's extremely important for the well-being of our republic, because in order for us to make informed decisions, we need to actually see how these people react. We need to see how they answer their questions. We need to see their responses for when there were policies that weren't enacted, or they were enacted poorly, or if there was something that the American people maybe didn't agree with. We need to have journalists, and they should be fair and journalists that are actually trying to get a reasonable response. They're trying to actually better understand the candidates instead of just these kind of gotcha questions. But the only way to do that, I think, is to have debates, or to have these politicians actually talk to the American people and give their stance and reasoning for whatever their positions may be. And honestly, we just really haven't had that. We did have debates on the Republican side, which I think are fantastic. And honestly, I think it showed that the best candidate really is Donald Trump. Nobody else really did well. But I think if Donald Trump had actually shown up to the debates, it would have been even more clear that none of these other people are going to be able to stand up to Donald Trump. Well, now that we're kind of in this process with the left, where they're also deciding whether or not they're going to run their, prior candidate, they decided they just weren't going to have debates. They decided that if your state might actually vote for somebody other than our chosen candidate, we're not going to count delegates. It was only after Joe Biden won that state, like, yeah, we'll go ahead and maybe we will do something about making sure that we count the delegates from your state. That's not democracy, and that's not good for the country. So I think that the best thing that could happen for the right is to have these people like Jimmy Dore, like these kind of outsiders that are more interested in actually passing decent policy that's going to protect all of the United States. Their vision is actually enacted where they say, okay, well, populists on both the right and the left should actually come together, and we should work towards goals that we can agree on. Let's work towards closing the border, because we know that the people that are hurt the most when the borders are open, they're the poor people. We don't have a lot of doctors coming from other countries that are sneaking into the United States to take the jobs of doctors or lawyers or engineers. No, they're hurting the working class people. So people on the left that actually want to protect, blue collar workers, they should want these closed borders. They should be skeptical of the open border policies that the Biden administration is putting in. And honestly, we've seen some of this from people on the left, like Jimmy Dore, like the boys over at Due Dissidence. So I think that it is 100% reasonable for us to actually hope that maybe these other outside people on the left, their vision is enacted, and we can actually get somebody on the left, or a group of people on the left, that we can work with for the good of the country. So anyway, everybody, I just wanted to share these thoughts with you. Thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It helps out a lot. And that's all I've got for today, but I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.